Yo, what's up everyone? I got a pretty crazy video for you guys today. This video is going to be changing how we approach recombs, especially when taking into account bases that have mods on them that in the past we haven't really been able to very easily shift from one base to another. For example, the crit on this helmet, or another example that I'm also going to be showing is temple gloves. As you can see here, this here. So in the past, transferring these modifiers from one base to another has involved us, in a way, having to try to gain the upper hand in terms of RNG by getting as many non-transferable modifiers on one base and just hoping that it chooses this modifier specifically to transfer over onto your other base. However, with the change that they have made to both prefix and suffix modifiers sort of being treated independently, which was already a thing, but there's sort of like a weird new logic that forces at least one modifier to spawn if there are two, and then it has to choose between those two modifiers. And also the way that it interacts with non-transferable modifiers now, it makes it so that you can actually 100% of the time, without fail, transfer this modifier onto a new base. This has various implications. So the first implication would be, of course, getting a T1 base with the modifier that you want, as you can see here. And I will give you guys sort of like a show of how you can do that a little bit later on. But basically, yeah, this crit modifier, you can transfer it over to a Giant Slayer helmet base, like as you can see here. And this is without any risk whatsoever, without risk of ever losing the critical strike modifier. The other thing that you can do is you can actually indefinitely use fracturing orbs until you hit the modifier that you want with the fracturing orb. This is because fractured modifiers, they do not transfer from one base to another, but regardless, since prefixes and suffixes are treated independently, what you can do is you can isolate the suffix down to just the suffix that you want, or alternatively the prefix. Use Eldritch Currency to fill the prefixes or suffixes regarding on where your modifier is, and then use this method that I will show you here in a second in order to safely transfer the modifier over after you have failed use your fracturing orb. Alright, so to talk you guys through the process of how you do this, the first thing that you want to do is you want to find an item such as this that has the modifier that you want, that has no other prefixes or suffixes depending on what the modifier you want is. So in my case, I'm looking to transfer over this critical strike Warcry exerting them thing, and I want that to be isolated on its own, so without any other affixes on suffixes. The way that you do that is you would have, basically, you just put your stat here, you know, Warcries, critical strike, whatever. And of course, if you're searching for your modifier, remember that you can always use tilde, and that makes it easier. And then empty suffix modifiers too, because we want to be sure that that modifier is isolated and that there is nothing that's going to be interfering with us being able to transfer it. Another example that you can also do is the temple gloves like this, for example. My search looks like this, so I will be looking for one of these three modifiers, because you can actually use harvest resistance swaps to change this modifier over. It is not really important which one you actually end up choosing, but regardless, you choose one of those, and then you look for two empty suffixes, and you buy the whichever base you want. The base, it doesn't matter at all, it just matters that you have two empty suffixes. Of course, you can also just like look for one and then look for potentially people that have also crafted a suffix. That is a thing, and the price will sort of go down a little bit. Or you could look for no empty suffix modifiers and just annul it down to the suffix that you do want to isolate before going on to the next step. Both of these options might potentially be cheaper, but of course, if you want to just have a 100% shot at doing that, then you would look for two empty suffix modifiers, you buy any of these bases, and you would go. Alright, so the next step of the process would be to buy a bunch of item level appropriate bases that you want to be transferring onto. So for example, Giant Slayer helmet is the best armor base that I can get in the game at the moment, and item level 85 rolls the highest modifier on this base. And then you do have to use a little bit of thinking here, because the next thing to do is to use a essence or anything that has that is a non-transferable modifier onto this base. What non-transferable means, it means that basically that affix does not naturally roll on either of the bases that you're trying to work with. So in this case, Intelligence does roll on helmets, so you absolutely do not want to use an intelligence essence. However, dexterity does not natively roll on armor helmets. In the way that you can check is, of course, you can go on path of a PoE TP. Looking here at the helmet bases, you can look at all of these modifiers, and then you can have a look through the essences and make sure that there is no overlap between the modifier that you're trying to be rolling and the modifier that can roll on the base itself. So as I previously mentioned, the dexterity does not natively roll on any sort of armor bases. So what you can safely assume is that if I do roll Screaming Essences of Sorrow onto the base, it will be treated as though it's a non-transferable modifier that is not native to the base itself. Now, you can always look through your essences, and there are some essences that are just unique to essences. Like in some cases, for example, if I was to use this on a dexterity base or something like that, it rolls flat armor, and that does not transfer from dex base to dex base or in base or whatever else, right? So there's many different options of essences that you can use here, but for this example, I will just use dexterity. So what you want to do now at this point is you want to prep your base. The way that you're going to be doing that, you're going to be using your essence, but then you're going to be annulling your recipient base down to basically just its one suffix, the dexterity suffix, the non-transferable one, as I said. And there you go. That is exactly what we wanted right here. I previously mentioned the prefixes and suffixes are treated independently, so it doesn't matter how many prefixes you have on here. The most important thing, or well, the only important thing really, is that you have the dexterity modifier and the crit modifier independent of each other, sort of on their own as suffixes. And the next step, which is where it all comes together, is to use the old recombinator. Gonna be the PoE 1 recombinator, as we call it, and you're gonna be just combining them. And now we have a 50% chance to choose the Giant Slayer base helmet or the general helmet, but we are guaranteed to always retain this critical strike war cry modifier. So I'm gonna click recomb. We're gonna hope that it's gonna be rolling on the Giant Slayer helmet. Unfortunately, we got unlucky, as you can see, but we have retained this crit mod. So what you would do is you would just go back, you would pick another base, and you would repeat the process until you basically have achieved transferring it over. So I'm just gonna annul it down to just the dexterity, hopefully. And luckily, annuls are basically free at this point. Like, annuls at the moment are like 2C or something. It's actually insane because there's so many people farming Harbinger and that sort of stuff. But hopefully we annul it down here soon so that this clip does not drag on for too long. There we go. We now have another base that we can transfer, so we can boom boom. And as I said, use the old recomb and just chuck it in. You double check everything, empty suffixes, prefix A, it's good. And then again, hope for the Giant Slayer helmet. We failed to transfer again, but you can see I've retained the crit mod, right? So you're basically having a 100% chance to retain the modifier the expensive modifier on the item, just by repeating this process over and over again. And there we go. We're going to try that again, and the only cost that you have essentially is going to be gold as well as thaumaturgic dust. So we're going to chuck it in again, and we're going to hope that it's transferring over once again over to the dex base. This time we get it, and as you can see, I transferred over the crit modifier over the Giant Slayer helmet. And this is insane in many ways, because this works with every modifier that is unique to a specific base. Like, for example, like these mods here. I haven't done the testing on on like all modifiers, but let's use this as an example as well. For example, like the temple modifier, which on a shit base is usually very, people don't really care about it, but on a good base, people do care about it. And then, of course, on top of that, fracturing them means that you don't have to go out of your way to buy the modifier on a good base every time you fail, because you could just recomb it again if you fail the fracture, right? If I was to fail the fracture, like if I was to fill the prefixes on this, for example, like if I was to do this, we're at the point now where we have a base with a suffix modifier, and I'm not going to be using a fracturing orb for this example because it's not well rolled enough. But just to give you an example of what you would do, is you would fill the prefixes here so that you have 3 prefixes and 1 suffix, so that it has 4 total modifiers. you would throw a fracturing orb, and say in the case that it did not hit the crit, you could just repeat the process that I just showed you with the helmets, and basically you would guarantee retaining the critical strike mod until you get rid of your fracture, and then you could just send the fracture again. And Eldritch Currency would just allow you to fill the prefixes again, you know, like mess with the prefixes, make sure that you have enough modifiers on your item, then Fracturing Orb, and if you miss, you just go again. So you're kind of, in a way, the expensive part of crafting these bases is no longer expensive. Rather, the bases themselves are now going to be what is expensive. But since there are so many on the market in general, it kind of guarantees that you're gonna be able to, within a decent amount of currency, get your fractures and get these like crazy modifiers onto good bases. So let's do it again with the gloves. And now intelligence does not roll on gloves natively, and we can double check that if we go into PoE, of course. Gloves will usually roll dexterity natively regardless of the base, and then on top of that, the attribute of that base itself. You can see here that intelligence does not roll on strength gloves. It also does not roll on dex gloves if I was to click here as well. See that? So we're using spy essences on these Leviathan gauntlets. I'm going to repeat the process that we did just earlier, null it down to just the int. Perfect, actually. And then chuck it in the blender. And we're hoping to transfer over this modifier onto the Leviathan gauntlets. And 3, 2, 1, boom. We got the Leviathan gauntlets with the crit. And that can be used with basically everything. Like, the implications this has is crazy. This was not a fluke. I promise you this was not a fluke. You do this 100% of the time with any base, with any specific modifier as such. This also means that I haven't tested it yet with grasping males, but you could potentially do that 100% of the time with grasping males. You can do that 100% of the time with things like this, for example, like this curse ring thing that I bought in case I wanted to play it. Unfortunately, this has another suffix modifier, so I would have to do a little bit of a gamble on that. But if you do follow this process, you will be able to transfer over any modifier from any base that is specifically native to that base against another base that has a modifier that isn't native to that base. So yeah, recombs, they're the bane of GGG's existence. Every time they rework them to make them better, or rather worse in the grand scheme of things, some players will outsmart and find ways to make crazy items regardless. So kind of worms they opened, and yep, glad to be part of it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that it's helped, and I hope that it has excited you about crafting as much as it's excited me, because it opens up the possibility for some pretty insane items, and for, in a way, deterministic fracturing without having to go out and buy crazy amounts of expensive bases. This changes everything. It's crazy. And thank you so much, Heinz, for showing me this tech. If you guys don't know, Heinz is a member of my community Discord. He's in my chat very often, and he's also doing mirror tier items for the seller shops sometimes too. So yeah, he's just a god, and I really appreciate the fact that he himself could be like profiting crazy amounts by just keeping this to himself, but rather he decided to share it with the community, share it with me, and then allow me to share it with you guys. So hope you found this video helpful, and thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, and see you next time. Peace.